but
Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait, and back with us is...
Hi, I'm Raymond Peterson.
And brought to you by the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. We're pre-taping the Thursday before our Monday air date, and we've had a couple of repeat shows.
Right,
The last one was about Press Freedom Day and a bunch of other things about fake news and the Rupert Murdoch propaganda machine that has this global effect. We don't need to revisit that because it'll continue to come up.
Yes.
So, but what we haven't done in a while is our usual feature, Being Black in America. So here you are,
one of
back,
my favorite.
and you came back.
One thing I'd like to say is we're actually taping on D-Day, so remember D-Day.
Okay, the D-Day anniversary, for you people who are too young to know, is the day that the Allied forces launched their counteroffensive from the shores of England. I think it was the Normandy cliffs, and then they landed on Omaha Beach
and Normandy, right.
And wherever, whatever. But that was the start of the counteroffensive that finally broke the German machine, and I guess supposedly made the world safe for democracy. Okay. So,
I'm sorry.
So much for history. Okay.
So much for history, yes. So we're starting on Being Black in America. Now let's see, what can we come up with? How about you and your partner are taking a walk with your dog, and you're going to a public space. This space being operated by Kamp Grounds of America, better known as KOA, which is free to the public. In, where was this? This was in Mississippi, Starkwell, Mississippi. This black couple took a walk with their dog. Now, I don't know if they were looking for a space to picnic. They didn't have any camping equipment with them. It was just them and their dog. The white manager of the property approached them, telling them that they couldn't be there because they needed a reservation to be on this public land.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about that is she couldn't just approach them. I mean, whether the story was true or not, she couldn't just approach them and say this. She had to have a gun in her hand, which she was concealing by her right hand. But according to the news report, according to one of the victims in this, the woman not only had the gun in her hand, she had her finger on the trigger and her thumb on the hammer, getting ready to cock and shoot.
Okay. Did law enforcement people step in by any chance? How did we get this story?
We got the story because they did report it. But the story is just from the point of view of the victims. I have nothing from the police or anything.
Is there an online, what's the online headline?
The online headline is, White woman in Mississippi arrested. Oh, she was arrested.
There we go.
I'm sorry. For pulling gun on black couple at KOA camp. I got so incensed at the story that I forgot that she was actually arrested.
You missed the entire headline. See what happens when we get carried away, folks? Instead of pulling back with our objective
you're right. This is why I have you here.
What did they charge her with?
What did they charge her with?
Before
long, KOA reported that they had KOA fired the woman.
Okay.
She's facing criminal charges for threatening and using a firearm, according to the news release from the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office. I'm sorry, that's not Oklahoma. It's I can't even pronounce that. I'm not even going to try. It's the county that this happened in. It is AKTIBBEHA, County Sheriff's Office.
Whoa.
The crime is punishable by a maximum fine of $500 and up to 3 months in county jail.
Whoa.
CNN reported that Howell turned herself in on Tuesday morning after the incident. She was then released on a $500 bond and is scheduled to appear in court later this month on June 25th.
Oh, okay. So
we
she,
don't know what
she
the
may,
outcome of
she
this
may
is.
actually pay a
think
price
she'll-
for
They
waving
might,
her gun.
they might fine
She
her.
may pay a
I don't
price.
think I don't think she's going to do the.
You don't think she's going to do
time
any
in
time?
jail?
Huh?
No, I don't.
Okay,
think-
all right.
I'd be very surprised.
Well, that's actually
That's a
an
minor
almost,
story.
almost positive development from a being black in America story.
Well, it beats the devil out of the cops responding and beating up the couple
There you go.
or killing them. Yeah,
Which has
I'll
happened in
take
the
this,
past.
which has definitely happened in the past.
So yeah, the under the Being Black in America umbrella, there was another story that I actually sent to Ray because that headline caught my attention. It was in New York Times of last week, because we're taping Thursday. When you see this on Monday, it would have been a last week story. But the New York Times headline for that particular day, I think it was June 2nd when it aired, "No one would listen. Cleared of murder after 33 years in prison." Keith Bush, opening graph. Keith Bush was arrested at 17 for a crime he always insisted he had not committed. On Wednesday, which would have been previous Wednesday, a judge threw out the murder conviction. He is 62 years old. So, I mean, that's your opening graph.
Right.
This is a black man who at 17 got picked up. Oh yeah, and the dateline on the story is actually Anne, the reporter, Arielle Dollinger. I loved her headline. I don't know if she was the headline writer, because normally the reporters aren't always the headline writers, but her opening graph was what caught my attention. It was just amazing. But the story was filed on May 22nd. For 4 decades, he insisted he had been convicted as a teenager of a murder he did not commit, strangling a 14-year-old girl in Bellport, New York. The police said he had beaten him, he said, forced him to sign a confession that he never even read. So he signed a confession that was coerced that he hadn't even read. And I read the story in depth, and the bottom line was the confession bore no bearing to the actual crime that was committed, et cetera, et cetera.
Or the forensic evidence.
Right. And so he wrote to a number of lawyers over the years, and it wasn't until like 2002 that a law student at Pace actually read his letter, dug into it, and spent time from then till now trying to get him exonerated and get him cleared. And she was put through all kinds of hoops.
Right, but no.
Let me just
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
No, the reason why I'm looking, because say what you're saying, because I want.
Well, I wanted to get to when they pressed for a new trial in 2005, or was it 2006?
In 2006, Mr. Bush wrote to Adele Bernard. That's the woman whose name I was looking for.
Okay.
A lawyer running a clinic at Pace Law School, and he was at Greenhaven at the time. He was innocent. He hoped she would help. Ms. Bernard was interested in his case immediately, she said, after reading the statement he had signed. It was internally inconsistent, she said. The facts that they put in it, the words that they used, none of it rang true. That's the confession they forced him to sign. And because she could tell by the wording of the confession that it was a coerced, made-up job, she decided to stay on that case for him. And she did.
Well, some of the evidence that she presented was that the DNA underneath the victim's fingerprints didn't match Mr. Bush's.
But a judge denied her 2008 motion to vacate the conviction.
And not only that, in his sworn statement, he apparently stabbed the woman with an Afro pick, but she was wearing a white sweater, and they found extremely little blood on it. So,
the judge also
understand
turned down her request for additional testing on the clothes and other crime scene evidence in 2008.
And I'd like to point out that they weren't using DNA evidence in 1975.
But when she took the case, she knew they
were.
were.
Exactly. exactly.
She also filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit to obtain records of the case. Those records contain evidence that the police had another possible suspect for Miss Watson's murder, the young lady who was killed, and another young man at the party named John W. Jones, Jr., who was a better suspect, who actually evidence from him was found at the crime scene, but they never told Bush's attorney about the other suspect. They kept all this stuff under wraps. The bottom line was, it was a bogus conviction. Finally, a DA today, two weeks, what was the headline? Last Wednesday, a judge threw it out.
Right, finally. But I want to go back to the original appeal, because one of the points that was brought up was that there was a so-called eyewitness of Mr. Bush leaving the party with this girl in the original trial. 5 years later, she recanted her story. Not only had she not seen Mr. Bush leave the party with this victim, she wasn't even at the party.
That's what came out later.
And the judge still denied the new trial. Mind-boggling to me. Well, it's not. It is and it isn't.
We will give credit where credit is due. Miss Bernard stuck with it for over 10 years.
Yes,
and finally, when she persevered, an incoming new district attorney in Suffolk County District Attorney Timothy D. Sini, S-I-N-I, asked a judge to throw out the conviction, saying prosecutors never told the defense the police had interviewed another possible culprit. And Sini, S-I-N-I, basically said, Your Honor, throw this out.
The other suspect that they interviewed admitted that he had seen the body. He said that, he stumbled upon it leaving the party. He was drunk and he stumbled upon this body. His comb was found at the scene, and yet he wasn't arrested.
Yeah, well, he has since passed away, I believe.
And he's since passed away, so we can't get his side of the story.
Can't get him tried.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was after 33 years. This man, Mr. Bush, is now a free man. Keith Bush.
I would like to quote him here. When he was asked if he had ever thought about giving up and through exasperation or whatever, he said, I don't know what that means, quote unquote. And I like that spirit. I don't know what that means. Never give up. Never give up. You have to fight for what you believe.
Well, my question is, who's going to give him back his 33 years?
Nobody's going to give him back his 33 years. No, he can't get that back. They can give him all the money in the world, but they can't give him back his 33 years. No. His reputation, he had to sign up as a sex offender also, even though he was exonerated of the crime. So he's going to spend the rest of his days with that hanging over his head.
Well, my thinking is, once they vacate this conviction, his attorney can petition to undo that.
Yeah, but, that has yet to happen.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
right.
Now that the conviction has been vacated, that means he really didn't commit the crime, so therefore he does not have an obligation.
But we already know that he didn't commit the crime. He's been exonerated in the courts.
No. Here's the point. You had to get that conviction vacated. Right. You had to get him exonerated, so that therefore there is no crime. He's not a sex offender.
But isn't that what happened when at the last trial?
I'm saying the fact that he had to register as a sex offender is dispensable if the crime has gone away. Now, I don't know what it's going to take to get him unregistered, but legally, if you didn't commit the crime, you're not a sex offender, so therefore you should not have to register as a sex offender.
No, I
understand. So what it's going to take to get him unregistered is another whole thing.
He was registered after the.
I don't think so, but we can check that.
We don't know, and we will check that out. Right,
but
absolutely.
But if you didn't commit the crime and you've been exonerated, you're not a sex offender.
Listen, I understand what what you're saying. And if you didn't actually kill somebody, you shouldn't go to jail for murder either.
I'm just saying you're out now because you didn't kill them.
Right.
So therefore, you didn't sexually offend them or assault them. So you should not be a.
Well, let's see how the legal wheels turn.
Yes,
We know they turn slowly.
How about
at the very best.
It could be another case of being black in America. He may be a sex offender for the rest of his life. Maybe, but I'm going to think positively that since this positive outcome came about after 33 years, this last hurdle too shall be cleared.
I would think that people would be scrambling all over the place to exonerate him and hold him
avoid a lawsuit.
innocent of everything.
Okay, so we'll beat that one. I don't want to whip it to death any further. So there was, within the fact of press freedom and that being our last show, there was another interesting story that came across my inbox that I tried to share with you. I don't know if you were able to look it up, but the headline, a Washington Post story, folks. Right. And this was also in last week's, I think June 4th was the date. And the author of the story is a journalist by the name of Jason Rezaian, Rezaian. And this being the Washington Post, I'm guessing he's a global opinions writer for the Washington Post. But
he was. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the subject of the story, who was actually a reporter for the Post stationed in.
That's Jason Rezaian.
So,
even after spending a year and a half in prison in Tehran, I knew that if I wanted to go on writing about Iran, I would be a target for plenty of public attacks, despite the abuse I had suffered at the hands of the Islamic Republic.
But he was on staff and he was stationed
it has
there.
been. But I never imagined the U.S. State Department would be funding my attackers. That's what caught our attention, folks. The headline of the piece is, the State Department has been funding trolls, period. I'm one of their targets. And that's Jason Rezaian. And the thrust of the story is, the State Department has been trying to mount a campaign of combating disinformation from the Iranian fake news disinformation machine. And so they hired a group of internet trolls and people to go online to help them in their battle. And the thrust of the story is that there seemed to be indiscriminately targeting people, including this guy who was a target of the Iranian government.
Very interesting.
So when it was brought to the State Department, here's the quote. On Friday, in response to the complaints, the State Department suspended the initiative's funding, quote, until the implementer takes necessary steps to ensure that any future activity remains within the agreed scope of work.
So they're speaking about him when they say the implementer. Okay.
No, they're not speaking about him. The implementer is the trolls that they
hired to beat up
on the other folk who then started targeting him.
That's what I wasn't understanding. Okay.
So they're trying to fight the bad guys, and they end up paying people to beat up on our people, our journalists, our folks who are trying to. And basically, I think the reason they targeted this guy was he basically wrote a piece that said something to the effect that slapping more sanctions on Iran to try to get them to supposedly not go into their nuclear program is counterproductive, because guess what? We're the only ones doing it because all our allies are not, because they didn't pull out of the agreement that Donald Trump pulled out of. And so basically that flagged the trolls, and so then they started attacking this guy, okay? So the bottom line is, if you say something that conflicts with the Donald Trump State Department and Donald Trump moves, then you're an enemy of the people, the enemy of the government. So whether you're a journalist working for a bona fide organization who are actually reporting news and actually doing public opinion stuff that's part of your opinion writing,
it's another example of the continuing effort to discredit the press.
Yes, and
by our government, and it continues. But this is so blatant. This is State Department. I mean, it's one thing to have the idiot in chief stand up there and say something, because only his followers are listening to him. But for somebody, the State Department behind the scenes doing stuff like this, it just doesn't it make you wonder what kind of society you're living in?
This is going to make you wonder? Nothing else made you wonder what kind of society you were living in? If this is what it takes to make you wonder.
But you should be able, but don't you think you should be able to trust your government?
Okay.
I mean, not that I do.
Okay, all right. Now you're asking these rhetorical questions.
I've got a lot of rhetorical questions.
Here's his quote. So we're faced with the irony that an initiative aimed at combating Tehran's disinformation campaigns is resorting to disinformation campaigns of its own, using taxpayer funds to spread lies about U.S. citizens.
And that's
we need programs that fight the spread of falsehood and propaganda, but such efforts shouldn't combat lies with other lies, and certainly not with public funding. Our government shouldn't be paying for propaganda against its own citizens, period. But guess what? Our government doesn't even have to do that. There is the Fox propaganda machine that they don't have to pay, and they do that all the time, every day and every night.
I haven't seen Fox in a very, very long time. I thought that some of the correspondents on Fox were speaking out a little bit against the fake news angle. Like Shepard Smith, notably, has criticized them in the past.
That was a couple months ago. I don't know whether they've done anything in the last few months.
Like I said, I don't watch it, so I don't know.
And our resource people that usually keep us up to date on Fox stuff have not flagged anything to our attention that says they've been upright and stalwart. But I do remember seeing something either yesterday or day before yesterday that one of the presidential Democratic candidates who went on a Fox show, I think it was Kirsten Gilibrand, and she was interacting with Chris Wallace, and Chris Wallace was rebuking her because she said something or other about, the Fox News coverage leading up to the abortion issue during the Republican presidential campaign was totally off the wall, because they were using all day long terms of infanticide as opposed to the fact that there was a struggle about abortion rights. And she said infanticide does not exist anywhere in this country. And so for Fox News to be calling, using that language was totally disingenuous and very bad to that effect. And he said, well, we invited you here. Why are you bashing us? She said, I'm glad you invited me, but that doesn't mean I can't courteously correct the record for what you're doing. So I thought that was extremely well done. And for Chris Wallace to try to chastise her for correcting them for using loaded terms, I find very disingenuous on Chris Wallace's part.
Chris Wallace is a big disappointment to me on many levels, but the number one is because
he used to be a decent journalist.
Exactly, and his
and
father.
People still think he is, but I got reservations on him. Just like I wrote off Brit Hume.
Right. Yeah. No, Chris.
I haven't written off Chris Wallace yet, but I wrote off Brit Hume a long time ago.
For those of you who don't know, Chris Wallace is the son of a very respected, renowned journalist, Mike Wallace.
Yeah, and one of his other sons, Rob, used to work with us over at 2020.
Right. He wasn't a son. I think it was a nephew.
Nephew?
Yeah,
all right. Another relative, but let's get it accurate. Yes, our job is to be as accurate as possible. Rob was probably a nephew.
I think he was a nephew.
Chris is a son, and I haven't quite written him totally off, because he actually once in a while says something that's journalistic, and he will hold some of the Trump people's feet to the fire on occasion.
Good.
So I haven't totally written him off. I wrote off Brit Hume a long time ago. I wrote off John Stossel a long time ago. And we mentioned these names first because we actually used to work with these people at ABC at one time, and so we know them fairly up close and personal. So when we tell you whatever journalistic credentials they may or may not have had, if I say I write them off, it means I've written them off for journalistic credentials.
Yeah, really.
But anyway, we're almost out of time. I think we started at 34 past the hour, which means
34 past the hour, so it means we have
about
2 minutes.
Yeah, 3.5 minutes or so.
See, this is why we need Bob here, because he always runs a timer.
To keep tabs on us.
Keep us honest, right.
But there was a couple of other stories that we wanted to mention. When They See Us. I say When They See Us because that's the Netflix series that Ava Duvernay just released last week, and it's all about the Central Park. Everybody's calling them the Central Park 5. And I'd like to correct the record because it was originally the Central Park 8. And I raised this because it became not 8, it became 7 because an attorney by the name of Alton Maddox figured out a way to make sure he challenged at least one of those initial charges, and that case got dropped almost immediately, so 8 became 7. Somewhere within the course of the way it unfolded, Alton Maddox and a couple of other attorneys may have done enough legal work to challenge the system back then to get the 7 dropped to 5. 2 more people did not get falsely accused, get coerced confessions, and I'm saying this from memory because I didn't go back and dig into the history that I actually lived through back then, but I do remember that there were a number of black attorneys, 1 or 2, maybe 1 or 2 besides Alton Maddox, who came forward to try to put a stop to that train that was rolling downhill nonstop about wilding and about wolf packs and all that crazy nonsense. That to this day I regret not trying to do something about that story because it was a big New York story, and at the time working for the network I didn't utilize enough journalistic judgment to say this is bigger than just New York, and what's happening, the way this story is being covered, is an abomination. And as much as I might have been thinking it, I didn't say it, and I didn't bring any of the ABC resources to bear to at least try to put a stop to that train.
But, you know, the media, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, all jumped on the theory that the people arrested are guilty.
Yeah, I'm saying, but not everybody in the media. I mean, I'm looking at this, and I'm not working for New York Daily.
Right.
And I'm looking at this, and I'm saying there's something wrong here. And when Maddox jumped in and started trying to stop the train, I was saying, somebody needs to be working with this guy. This train needs to be stopped. But what I should have done in '89 is what I did in '81, was to write a memo saying we need to look at this as a news organization.
But